Welcome back. All right, so 32 logos on the board. It's a 32 team video, and I want to talk about 32 players who are off to statistical slow starts. No goalies are analyzed in this video. And yeah, 32 players off to slow starts. Obviously, it's a small sample size, but some of these players are going to have seasons that statistically don't measure up to what's expected. And for some teams, I had multiple candidates. For some teams, I only had the one, really, or I had a hard time finding one because some teams are off to really good starts to trade. So what I've got here, we've got the Pacific Division first, then the Atlantic, then the Metro, and then the Central, and in various orders for where I put the teams on the board. So I didn't go alphabetical by division either, but that way Winnipeg is not last. Winnipeg is third from last. So this is completely different from... well, second from last. So 30th instead of 32nd. You're welcome, Winnipeg. All right, and Anaheim's not first; they're second. So it's completely different than doing it alphabetically because we're starting with Vegas. All right, so in Vegas has had a perfect start. However, Vegas. Barbashev, 6 games played, just 1 goal so far for Barbashev. So Barbashev signs the big extension. He's playing well, and again, they're off to a perfect start. This is where it's okay to see a guy off to a slow start. This is where you don't see that kind of pressure where you're like, you know what, Barbashev, take your time, figure it out, you'll be fine, and you're not overly concerned. You know, if he produces at this rate for a full season, obviously his cap hit's a little high, but he's not going to produce this way for a full season, right? So next on the board is Anaheim, and it kind of has to be Zegras. So 5 games played by Zegras, just the 1 assist so far. Zegras is getting opportunities. Great. He's getting opportunities. That's what you want if you're a Ducks fan. He's not hitting the net. He's not hitting the net often enough and kind of shooting it to where the goalies are too if he hits the net. And so it's going to take him some time. Again, I am a big fan of Trevor Zegras. I'm hoping he gets this figured out sooner rather than later. Or he's not going to be in one of the best forwards in the league the next time I do a video, is he? So yeah, Zegras just the 1 assist in 5 games. Tough start for him. And again, as I've said, the 1-4 record for the Ducks I don't think tells you they've actually played pretty well. They haven't played badly. Last night against Boston, they were in that. They had a lead briefly against Boston in the 3rd period and then just couldn't hold it. Boston able to worm their way out of it. Calgary, there were a couple of choices I had here, but to me, Kadri stands out. He's just got 1 assist. So while Huberdeau's not lighting up the world exactly with his offense either, for 6 games, Kadri was just the 1 assist. This is the thing. This is what people said when he signed the contract. Players, as they enter their 30s, the production can drop off, and it can drop off dramatically. It doesn't for everybody, but it can, and this is why those contracts signed by players who are 29 or 30 years of age, these contracts can be ridiculed. When they're signed, I don't say these are great contracts, just I get it, you know. I understand why they get signed. Doesn't mean that they're going to age all that well, but it's just that's the way the marketplace is right now. We'll see if this slew of contracts that have been given to players who are 29 and older for, you know, and then the diminishing returns, we'll see if that changes a GM or the GM's minds the next time around when you're in that same situation. For the Edmonton Oilers, this one kind of surprised me a little bit. Evander Kane, just the 1 assist in 5 games. One question mark with the Oilers has always been, you know, that's the scoring on the wing, and where's that scoring going to come from on the wing? Picking up Evander Kane, since he arrived, he has been a pretty productive scorer, pretty consistent. This year, just the 1 assist so far. So when you're looking for Oilers that you can say, well, what's going on here? I start with Kane. Holloway is on the list too. He doesn't have a point yet. But of the two, you would expect Kane to have the goals and everything. You can understand with Holloway, he's younger, maybe still learning the league. But Kane, you would not have that to lean on. And it's interesting because I saw an article just last week on how, you know, Kane's enjoying Edmonton and everything's fine, everything's great, and everything's settled down in his life, which is great. But if he doesn't produce, that's going to lead to some less than comfortable conversations down the road. For Seattle, and there were a few for Seattle, but again, when I'm putting this list together, I'm like, yeah, I want to talk about that player. Eeli Tolvanen. So they pick up Tolvanen last year on waivers from Nashville. This year for Seattle, just the 2 assists in 6 games. Opportunities have been there, but am I all that surprised Tolvanen's production's dropped off? Not really. So we'll see if Tolvanen can get on a heater sometime soon. Lord knows that Seattle was a team I was thinking about wearing a jersey for this video, but San Jose hasn't won a game yet, so that works. But yeah, Seattle, it is a surprise, the big struggles that we've seen from this team so far. Only winning 1 of their first 6, and Tolvanen with no goals in those first 6 games. That does stand out. In Vancouver's case, it is a player with no points. And in Vancouver, it's a similar situation to what I was talking about with Barbashev. The Canucks 3-2 to start the season. Beauvillier, no points yet in those 5 games. The opportunities, a few here and there. Beauvillier traded from the Islanders to Vancouver. Had a decent little run initially with Vancouver, but definitely tailed off towards the end of the year. And I don't think he's necessarily going to start scoring all that much. His contract is pricey, but again, that was the price of being able to move Horvat, and then of course the Islanders signed Horvat to that huge deal. So for Beauvillier, we'll see whether or not he picks it up, right? So let me know your thoughts. Does Beauvillier pick it up? For San Jose, the team that of course I'm wearing, I tried to stay away from young players for the most part, but I want to talk about Eklund. I do think Eklund's generating opportunities. He just has the 1 goal in 5 games. I think it's similar to what we've seen in Chicago, where, you know, if you shut down Bedard, you're in pretty good shape. Well, with San Jose, and especially with some, you know, Couture still out, Eklund, you can kind of key on him, right? So 1 goal in 5 games. As I said, he is generating some opportunities. I thought about putting Barabanov up there, but to me, Barabanov not scoring is a different conversation than Eklund. Barabanov had a career year last year. Maybe he's not able to follow that career year up. And for Eklund, he is seen as part of, you know, this future core for the San Jose Sharks. So hopefully he gets it going soon. On the LA side, I feel kind of bad about this one because Kempe, it's not an awful start. However, Kempe had a ridiculous season last year for goals. He has 1 goal, 2 assists for 3 points in 5 games thus far this year. The LA Kings need Kempe to keep scoring goals, and at this rate, that would be what? And again, I know it's early in the season, but 1 goal in 5 games, so 10 over 50 games. It's not optimal. So look for Kempe to go on a run. One other thing to keep in mind is when I do these videos, I like to highlight players that aren't scoring because I know some of these guys are going to get going, and they might be flying under the radar if you're doing fantasy hockey. So yeah, Kempe, a goal and 2 assists. You may find too that guys in fantasy are like, I'm dumping this guy, he's not producing. And so I'm just pointing out some of these guys aren't producing, but they may very well start. In Toronto, my example of that would be Tyler Bertuzzi. Bertuzzi, it's always interesting to see how the transition to a new team goes. And I think that's part of what we've seen with Bertuzzi. So he's got 1 goal in 5 games. Now, when he went from Detroit to Boston last year, it was seamless. Clearly going to Toronto has not been quite as seamless as it was when he went to Boston. That being said, I do expect his scoring to be better than 1 goal, 0 assists per 5 games he plays this year. Toronto, we know they're going to score their share of goals. And Bertuzzi, by virtue of, you know, I would think he stays in the top 6. That being said, you know, obviously Samsonov at this point, there's discussion about whether or not he's going to be the starter. And Bertuzzi could end up on the 3rd line, but at some point soon. But I do think the production's going to pick itself up. I'm kind of more concerned with Domi than I am with Bertuzzi, even though Domi's produced more points to this stage. For Montreal, there were a couple I went back and forth on for Montreal, but I'll go with Slafkovsky. Slafkovsky, of course, a #1 draft pick very recently. 4 games played this year, 1 assist. One question that's going to come up if his production doesn't get better this year is going to be looking back at his rookie year. Should Montreal have brought him into the NHL right away? Should he have had time to mature into his game before debuting in the NHL? And there's certainly a discussion to be had for that. But if his production starts picking up soon, that conversation changes completely. But the no goals in 4 games, that's something he's going to need to change. If Montreal's going to take what's been an okay start to the season and really build on it, they're going to need a guy like Slafkovsky to step in and start producing some more goals and points. For Detroit, it was not easy to find a player for Detroit. I'm going to be completely honest. Almost everybody in Detroit is off to a ridiculous start to the season. So I had to go with Fisher. Yeah, Christian Fisher. Christian Fisher, just the 1 assist in 6 games so far. And again, it was the one that I saw statistically and thought, well, he doesn't have a goal yet. Fisher should be good for, some goals and some points at some stage of the season. And to this point, he only has one assist. But again, everybody in Detroit's playing really well. And again, what I said with Barbashev applies to Detroit as well. Things have got off to a really good start, so there's zero pressure on a player who's not producing. That is the benefit to being on a team that's off to a really good start. You don't get anywhere near the attention from the press, from the fans, and just in general about your slow start as you do if the team is off to a slow start. Tampa Bay, this one surprises me, not going to lie. Sergachev. Who's Sergachev? All right, well, created a new player. Just put him in your game. Pretend he's been there the whole time. Sergachev only has 2 assists, and there's only 2 players I'm gonna put a plus-minus up for, and because it's alarming. He's a -8 in 6 games. Plus-minus is a flawed stat, and I say this. People get mad at me for saying it when I say it, but if I don't say it, there's somebody in the comments saying it. So yes, it is a flawed statistic in general, but when you see a guy whose plus-minus is... The minus is an 8 and the games played is a 6. It's alarming. And in Sergachev's case, it looked like he had taken the mantle as the offensive defenseman for Tampa Bay. And early in the season, again early, it's kind of reversed. Hedman's getting the points. Sergachev just has the 2 assists. And again, that plus-minus is very concerning. Tampa Bay's been very good on the power play. Clearly 5-on-5. It's been a different story. For Ottawa... So DeBrincat's doing fantastic, which may increase the amount of pressure on Kubalik to produce. Kubalik's a 20-goal scorer. However, he has no points yet in 5 games. Kubalik can score 20 goals in the NHL. He could hit 25. I don't think he gets there this year necessarily because, again, now he has 0 goals in 5 games. The longer you go through this pointless streak or goalless streak, the harder it is to reach that total, obviously. So... for Ottawa, who were off to a decent start, Kubalik's numbers, not overly frustrating, but I'm sure for him it's frustrating because you come to a new team, you want to make your impression, you want to show what you can do, and there's 0 points so far in 5 games to show for it. In Buffalo, there were a few I could have picked from Buffalo. When I did the preview this morning, I talked about Tage Thompson, so now we're going to talk about his line mate, Alex Tuch. Now, I did say during the summer, I did the video on players that I thought would fall off from the seasons they had this past year, and I felt like Tuch produced too much. Well, 1 assist in 5 games is too little. That's not the kind of production that I thought. I figured a 55, 60-point pace. Yeah, this is not a 55 or 60-point pace. Tuch and Thompson are very, very key for the Buffalo Sabres if they're going to come through on that potential and finally make it back to the playoffs for the first time since 1847. So George Washington was their starting goaltender the last time they made the playoffs. I'm obviously kidding. It was 2011, but it kind of feels like that if you're a Buffalo fan, doesn't it? All right, so Florida. Yeah, Washington played goal. Don't you know that? Anyways, Florida, player that I've been waiting to make that breakthrough, and that's Lindell. Lindell, no points to this stage of the season in 5 games. So Florida off to a 2-3 start. Keeping in mind they were 0-2 to start the season, so they've won 2 of their last 3. Win-loss records are kind of just all over the place at this time of year. But Lindell's 0 points in 5 games has to be frustrating for him. He's a very good defensive forward. The good news for Lindell is if the offense never ends up advancing beyond what he's already shown at the NHL level, his defense is good enough to keep him in the National Hockey League. So we'll see how the rest of the season plays out for Lindell. But no points in 5 games for him yet. For the Boston Bruins, this one was actually kind of easy as well. I feel bad for Pavel Zacha. So looking back as a Canuck fan, back to when Cliff Ronning was a top center, and then Brendan Morrison ended up being a top center, and it felt like in both of those cases in Vancouver, they might have been better off as second-line centers. And it feels like with Boston, with Zacha, if he's going to be the #1 center, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy because you've got Pasta, you've got Marchand, and those guys are absolute elite level talents. Zacha to this point just has the 1 assist in 5 games. We'll see how long he's there because there's this Poitras kid that looks pretty darn good. And I don't know how much longer he's not going to be moving up the lineup. I think that if he keeps playing like he did last night, he'll move up the lineup. And if Zacha keeps producing the way that he is, which is 1 point in 5 games, we may end up seeing a kid playing a far more prominent role for Boston this year than I had expected. I think most Boston fans did. Even in the preseason, I liked Poitras. I didn't expect that, though. Anyways, moving on to New Jersey, the former team for Zacha. It is not a former Bruin for New Jersey, although I mean I could because there's definitely players there who've played in played in Boston. But I'm going with Mercer. So Dawson Mercer, just no points so far in 4 games for Mercer. Again, is he getting opportunities? Yeah. And it will at some point start, the puck will start going in the net. He'll start picking up helpers as well. But it is a slow start by his standards. And for New Jersey, they've just played the 4 games thus far. They're 2-1-1. I did think in their last game they started clicking like the New Jersey Devils of last season. And I think Mercer's going to be a big part of that too as the season rolls along. For Philadelphia wasn't easy either. And when was the last time I said that? So I'm going with Cam York, just the 1 goal in 5 games, because it's hard to find a player in Philadelphia that statistically is off to a slow start. Saw a comment on the power rankings about, can't believe, along the lines of can't believe Philadelphia's in the top 10. I think that's a testament to how important Couturier and Atkinson are to the Philadelphia Flyers. And so for York to be off to a start where he's just got the 1 goal in 5 games, well, the team's 3-1-1. So there's not going to be any complaints about that, and York's a really capable defenseman too. I'm just a little surprised there's just the 1 goal to show for it thus far. Columbus. So last season, Texier did not play. And it can be tough if you've taken a year away from the National Hockey League to come back in. Texier finding that this year has no points in 5 games thus far. Columbus is off to a decent start to the year, 3-2 on the season so far. So for Texier, probably not a pressure on him probably not a lot of pressure on him, but with the lineup that Columbus has, if Texier doesn't start to produce, he could find himself as a healthy scratch. And especially if they do find a way to move a defenseman, and if they bring another forward back in that trade, maybe Texier ends up being on the outside. We'll find out. For the New York Islanders, so the Islanders have only played 3 games thus far, but Lee 1 assist in 4 games. And I feel bad because there was a game, one of their 4 games, Lee was right in front of the net. I thought he tipped it in. I was like, well, that goal's going to get changed to Anders Lee. I think Lee tipped it in. Clearly he didn't because he still just has the 1 assist in 4 games. So he's at the net. He's there. He's still getting the opportunities. Eventually it starts going in the net. But to this point, it hasn't. For the New York Rangers, so over the summer, of course, the Jets bought out Blake Wheeler. He goes to the Rangers on a deal that looks, pretty solid for Wheeler, but he has yet to produce. No points in 5 games. I don't have the plus-minus on the board, but he's also a -3. And again, you get to that discussion about as players get older, the production does drop off. I think Wheeler was in a perfect situation for himself offensively in Winnipeg. I understand the mix didn't work. I know, buying him out was likely the right move by the Winnipeg Jets. But it was a situation where Wheeler was going to get a lot of points. So if Wheeler was still in Winnipeg, I would expect he'd have at least a couple of points right now. But in New York, learning a new team after so long in Winnipeg might just be taking him a little bit longer. For Washington, so we've talked about Ovi a lot, and I feel like that's fine, but the more alarming thing is Backstrom. So I've talked about Backstrom's hip surgery, and it should come up here again. He has no points in 4 games, and it's just not the same. When you're watching Washington this season, they just seem to be a step slower than the opponents. Whether it was Montreal on Saturday, against Ottawa, the game before that, they're just slower. And I in a league now where speed is so important, skill is so important, being on the slower side, it's okay if you're getting the production, but Oshie doesn't have any points. Backstrom, again, no points in 4 games. Ovechkin hasn't produced a goal yet. This is a team that if they don't get it going over the next couple of weeks, the conversation is going to become one of, all right, so is Washington going to need to rebuild? Which is not a conversation that Ovechkin's going to want to have. It's not a conversation that I think Backstrom or any of them are going to want to have, but you're kind of forced into it if your team doesn't get it together and start winning some games. Carolina. So one thing that hasn't been off to a slow start with Carolina is the injury bug. So I'll just say that straight up. But Orlov, I don't know if he's having trouble with the system or what it is. He has 2 assists in 10 games, which is fine. However, he's a -10. So Orlov had a great run with Boston after the trade from Washington. Was that sustainable? No. I didn't think that was something that would have been sustainable. So while I had kind of hoped against hope that Boston would find a way to re-sign him, I understood that for cap reasons they weren't able to do so. But a -10 in Carolina, that's a crazy number. Again, as I mentioned here, Sergachev 2 assists and a -8, Orlov a -10 in the same amount of time. So that's something that's going to need to get fixed. Obviously, with Carolina, injuries to big names, and they're not getting the defensive numbers they need. Orlov's part of that. I didn't understand over the summer why they decided to revamp the blue line necessarily, and so far it hasn't worked out. We'll see if things change. Maybe these guys just haven't quite got into the system yet. For Pittsburgh, a name I've had on the board in the odd preview here and there, Raquel. Raquel had a really good bounce back year for Pittsburgh last year, produced pretty well. This year he just has the 1 assist in 5 games thus far. Pittsburgh, it's not as dire with Pittsburgh, obviously, as it is with Washington, but being 2-3 to start the season, that's not what they want. Carlson has looked good. Raquel, just the 1 assist, though. Yeah, they need some goals from Raquel, and they're going to need to get themselves together here pretty quickly. In the East, you can see that Detroit's gotten better. There are other teams that are looking to move into a playoff spot if Pittsburgh doesn't, get things together and play a little more consistently over the next few weeks. Yeah, there could be some conversations in Pittsburgh similar to the ones we're having about Washington right now. Again, just crazy speculation, but hey, it's early in the season. That's what it's there for. Minnesota, it's not Rossi. It's Freddie Gaudreau. I'm very surprised 5 games into the season, Freddie Gaudreau doesn't have a point yet. Freddie Gaudreau is a hard-working forward. He is one of my favorite players in Minnesota. He and Foligno both. The production just hasn't been there. But in Foligno's case, he has a point. Gaudreau doesn't. So I throw Gaudreau's name on the board. I don't expect him to stay pointless for many more games. And he can heat up. He absolutely can. I think his offensive side is there, and so at some point soon he'll break that goose egg. For Nashville, another goose egg here. Trennan. So Nashville's gotten back to, and that's 6 games. Sorry, guys. Six games, no points for Trennan. And likely that he'll get out of that 0 points category as well pretty soon. Nashville wins back-to-back games to get to 3-3. We'll see if they can keep that up, stay in the hunt for a playoff spot. But getting Trennan going would definitely be to his benefit as well as to the team's benefit. For St. Louis, a bit of a surprise. Again, though, right? Shen's in his early 30s. 4 games, no points. Is this a drop-off, or is he going to go on a bit of a run here? St. Louis, of course, up until that 4th game, the conversation was, so they can't score. And coming out of that game, they did. They scored on Pittsburgh, but they're going to have to maintain it, right? It's going to have to be a game-by-game thing. A lot of that is going to fall on Thomas and Kyrou, but getting Shen going would go a long way to fixing things too. So you need your scoring depth, and you need to be able to have that scoring finish for St. Louis. You can't count on Binnington to maintain a save percentage in like the 950 range, something insane like that. That's not going to continue, so you need the goal scoring for when his numbers become more human, right? For Dallas was pretty easy. Now, if Roope Hintz stays healthy, Robertson's going to get points. He has 2 assists and 4 points so far. Of course, Hintz came back in the last game. I believe Robertson had an assist in that game, but he just has the 2 points in 4 games. Both of them assists. So no goals for Jason Robertson yet. Robertson had a great year last year. He's looking to build on that this season. There's some pressure on Dallas as a contender for the Stanley Cup. And we haven't seen from Robertson yet that dynamic move to the net. It's coming. Maybe tomorrow night we'll see it. Or somebody will see it. There's 16 games on tomorrow. I say that, and yet the way they've spaced out the games, it'll be easier for me to follow than it was on Saturday when there were 10 games on at the same time, so which included the Dallas game. But yeah, Robertson 2 points in 4 games. I would expect he'll score at a higher rate than that from here. Chicago. I'm not putting Bedard up because I don't think Bedard's had a slow start. I think 4 points in 6 games is maybe not where he might want it to be, but yeah, he's going to score at home. But Reichel, 6 games for Reichel, no points yet. I thought he had one of his better games this past game for them against Vegas. He was generating opportunities. He just has not broken the goose egg on the points sheet. And if you're going to get Bedard going, you need to show other guys can score as well. So if Reichel could get on a little bit of a run, that might give teams a little bit more to think about when they're going against Chicago, and it might create more space for other offensive players like Hall as well. Just follow whatever Corey Perry's doing. Corey Perry has been producing really well for Chicago. Winnipeg. Nick Ehlers, 5 games, just the 2 assists. Ehlers was around the net a lot against the Oilers the other night. I know there were at least, I think there were 2 times that I put up that Ehlers got denied at the net by Skinner. So he's getting opportunities. He's getting to the net. Eventually that goose egg gets broken, hopefully next game, right? Very good player, one of my favorite players on the Jets. And so hoping to see him get it going soon. For Arizona, this one surprises me. So Arizona's off to the best start they've been in a long time. And I know how sad that might be to some, but you know what? I like the optimism for Arizona. That being said, Barrett Hayden, no points in 5 games. He had a really strong run in the second half of the season with Schmaltz and Keller. And while Schmaltz and Keller are still getting that production, they're doing it while Hayden has 0 points. None. 0 points for Hayden through 5 games. That's got to change. And again, you know, I write his name on the board. I know how part of the reason I like taking notes, because it gives me a good idea for who's generating opportunities, who's getting to the net. And I know I've been putting Hayden's name on the board. It just hasn't been in the scoring part of any of my review boards. And finally, Colorado for the Avs. Bowen Byram. Now, of course, with Byram, the challenge for him is he's got to stay healthy, but he just has the 1 assist so far in 5 games, and it's not the kind of total that I would have expected for him after 5 games. Again, that being said, it is early in the season. So, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Which of the players on the board do you think is going to have a tremendous run, and we're going to forget all about the slow start? And which player on the board do you think, yeah, he's had a slow start, he's going to have a miserable season? I would expect some votes on that. I know there's people who don't like Zegras. I know there are people who will say that with Kadri. Any player who's in their 30s will probably get a vote or 2 here and there. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. And I'm just happy we're back playing hockey. I'm glad that the games are on. It's always fun talking about this with all you fine people on the internet. These are the conversations I used to have at my workplace, where my supervisor would say, "Can you stop talking about hockey for 5 minutes?" I think the aggravating part was I could do my menial tasks while I still just talked about hockey and do it right. Just drove people nuts. Anyways, not everyone can do that. But hey, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.